The great kingdom of Zundora stretched from the rolling golden plains to the dense, whispering forests. Its people thrived under the rule of King Jabari, a ruler both just and wise. He had led his people through years of prosperity, ensuring peace with neighboring lands and guarding the kingdom's wealth like a father protecting his children. But in the vast palace halls, the problem troubled the aging king. His two sons, Prince Omari and Prince Tau, were fools. Omari, the elder, was a man of extravagant tastes. He wore the finest robes, ate only the richest foods, and spent his days admiring himself in polished bronze mirrors. He believed that as the firstborn, leadership would naturally come to him. After all, kings did not need to be wise, only grand. Tau, on the other hand, was reckless and arrogant. He fancied himself a warrior but had never fought a real battle. He was always ready with a boast, challenging soldiers to duels only to be disarmed within moments. Yet, in his mind, he was invincible. The people of Zundora whispered among themselves. "What will become of us when King Jabari is gone?" they asked. One evening, the king gathered his council of elders. The old men sat in a circle, their faces solemn. "We must test them," said Elder Mosi, his deep voice filling the chamber. "A true leader must prove his wisdom." "But how?" King Jabari asked. "Omari believes himself above all effort, then Tau is blinded by his own arrogance." Elder Mosi stroked his beard. "Then we shall give them a challenge where foolishness leads only to failure." And so, the challenge was set. The next morning, in the great throne room, King Jabari sat upon his golden seat, his sons standing before him. "My sons," he said, "the time has come for you to prove yourselves. Beyond the great river, in the feared valley of echoes, lies the crystal of clarity. It is said that whoever possesses it gains wisdom beyond measure. Bring it to me, and the worthy one shall inherit the throne." Omari scoffed. "A mere crystal. I will have it in my hands before the sun sets." Tau smirked. "You may as well stay behind, brother. A future king must be strong, not just well-dressed." King Jabari said nothing, only watching as his sons turned and left, each determined to outdo the other. The journey begins. The two princes set out from the palace, each leading a small group of servants. But even before reaching the great river, their foolishness became apparent. Omari, unwilling to dirty his fine sandals, ordered his men to build a floating litter so he could be carried across the muddy roads. But as they approached a narrow bridge, the extra weight was too much. With a mighty creak, the bridge collapsed, plunging Omari and his litter into the water. Tau, meanwhile, chose to race ahead on horseback, convinced speed was the key to victory. But he ignored warnings about mud pits in the path. His horse reared in panic, sending him flying into a swamp. Both princes emerged drenched and humiliated. But instead of learning from their mistakes, they blamed their servants and continued their journey, each convinced he was still the wiser brother. As the sun set behind the distant mountains, the Valley of Echoes loomed ahead, dark and foreboding. Somewhere within its depths lay the crystal of clarity, but whether the foolish princes would ever claim it remained to be seen. The two princes, Omari and Tau, stood at the edge of the Valley of Echoes, a place of deep ravines, towering cliffs, and an eerie, endless whisper that danced in the wind. The valley was said to be cursed, where voices of the past murmured secrets and lies, deceiving those who entered. But Omari and Tau, in their foolish pride, paid no mind to the stories. Each believed himself to be the smarter, the stronger, and the most deserving of the throne. A path divided. "We must travel quickly," Omari declared, adjusting his damp, ruined robes. "I have no intention of spending a single night in this wretched place." Tau smirked, tightening the straps of his sword. "Then perhaps you should turn back now, brother. A king must endure hardship. I will take the direct path through the cursed marshlands. Only the brave can survive it." Omari scoffed. And I will take the safer route through the forest of whispers. Only a fool charges into danger when there is an easier way. So the brothers parted ways, each certain that he would be the first to reach the crystal of clarity. Omari and the Forest of Whispers. The Forest of Whispers was unlike any other. The air was thick with the scent of strange flowers, and the trees loomed like silent watchers. Yet, the most unsettling thing was the voices, soft, melodic, and persistent. As Omari and his men trudged through the undergrowth, the whispers grew louder. "Prince Omari," a voice cooed. "Why do you seek the crystal? You are already the wisest of all." Omari straightened, pleased. "At last, someone with sense," he murmured. Another voice, as sweet as honey, added, "Why struggle for a kingdom that should already be yours? Why not take what is rightfully yours, now?" Omari paused, his mind stirring with possibility. The voices began to weave visions before his eyes, images of himself upon the throne, wearing golden robes, ruling Zundora without question. He turned to his servants. "There is no need to continue. The voices have spoken. The throne is mine, and there is no need for this foolish journey." His men exchanged nervous glances. "But, my prince..." Omari waved them off. "Enough. We will stay here and feast." As if on cue, the trees twisted and shifted, revealing a long banquet table laden with roasted meats, exotic fruits, and goblets of rich wine. Omari, lost in his arrogance, sat and ate. His servants hesitated, but the prince's glare left them no choice. What he failed to realize was that the more he ate, the heavier his limbs became. His vision blurred, his thoughts slowed. The Forest of Whispers was not offering a feast, it was consuming him. Tau and the cursed marshlands. While Omari fell into his own folly, Tau was knee-deep in trouble, literally. The cursed marshlands were thick with bubbling pits of black mud, strange glowing plants, and the occasional fleshless skeleton, a reminder of those who had come before. But Tau, ever arrogant, laughed at the warnings. "A true warrior fears no swamp," he declared, stomping forward. His men, more cautious, stepped lightly behind him. The deeper they ventured, the stranger the landscape became. The ground oozed beneath their feet, and shadowy figures flickered at the edges of their vision. Then came the wailing. At first, it was faint, like the distant cry of a wounded animal. But soon, it grew, a chorus of tormented voices. Tau clenched his fists. Tricks and illusions. Nothing more. But then, he saw them. Figures began to rise from the marsh, warriors clad in ancient armor, their faces hollow skulls, their empty eyes locked onto him. "The fallen kings," one of his men whispered in terror. The ghostly warriors drew their weapons. Their voices merged into one chilling command. "Turn back, or be buried among us." Tau, ever the fool, laughed. "You expect me to fear ghosts?" He drew his sword and charged. The first spectral blade met his own with an ear-splitting clang. The force sent Tau stumbling backward. Another ghost slashed at him, forcing him to dodge. His men, overwhelmed by fear, fled into the darkness. Tau soon realized the terrible truth: his blade passed through the ghosts, but their weapons could wound him. Bleeding and gasping, he fell to one knee. The warriors surrounded him. The marsh began to pull him down. Cold mud reached his waist, then his chest. Just as the ground threatened to consume him, a voice rang out. "Prince Tau, remember the legend." It was Zuba, his servant, the only one brave enough to stay. "The fallen kings are bound by regret. If you acknowledge their wisdom, they will let you go." Tau, desperate, cried out, "Great warriors! I was wrong to challenge you. I honor your wisdom. Spare me." The ghosts paused. The wailing softened. Then, like mist, they vanished. Tau collapsed onto dry land, gasping. He had survived, but only by swallowing his pride. The princes reunite. Hours later, Tau stumbled out of the marsh, tattered, bruised, but alive. And there, at the edge of the forest, he found Omari, lying on the ground, his once grand robes torn and dirted, his lips stained with food. Tau kicked his brother's boot. "What happened to you?" Omari groaned. "The voices, they lied. I should be king." Zuba, standing beside Tau, sighed. "Both of you have been tested, and both of you have failed." The brothers scowled. "Failed? You fell for the illusions of the forest," Zuba told Omari. "And you, Prince Tau, underestimated forces far older and wiser than yourself." Omari sat up, rubbing his aching head. "Then what now?" Zuba pointed toward the mountains. "The city of illusions lies ahead. You still have a chance to redeem yourselves, but only if you learn from your mistakes." The princes exchanged a wary glance. For the first time, they both felt a creeping doubt, perhaps they were not as wise as they had believed. And so, with weary steps and bruised egos, the foolish princes continued toward their next trial, unaware that the greatest deception still awaited them. The sun was setting as Prince Omari, Prince Tau, and their lone remaining servant, Zuba, arrived at the gates of the City of Illusions. The grand walls shimmered under the twilight, their surfaces rippling like liquid gold. Before them stood a towering gate adorned with strange carvings. As soon as Omari laid eyes on it, he smirked. A city built of gold. At last, a place that recognizes true greatness. Tau scoffed. "Only fools are dazzled by shiny things, brother. A true warrior has no need for riches." Before their argument could escalate, the gates opened on their own, revealing a breathtaking city. The streets were paved with silver bricks, the buildings constructed of polished jade, and the air was filled with the sound of laughter and music. The scent of roasting meat and spiced wine drifted toward them, making their mouths water. A group of elegantly dressed figures approached, their faces alight with welcome. At their center was a radiant woman draped in deep purple robes. Her presence was regal, her beauty mesmerizing. "I am Queen Naya, ruler of the City of Illusions," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "Welcome, noble princes. You must be weary. Please, allow us to grant you rest and comfort." Omari grinned. "A wise offer. I have endured far too much hardship." Tau frowned. "We have a mission to complete." But before he could finish, a man in golden armor stepped forward. His eyes were dark and piercing. "Prince Tau," the man said, bowing. "I have seen your strength, your unmatched skill. Our kingdom is in need of a mighty warrior king." Tau straightened. "A warrior king?" Queen Naya smiled. "Yes. You are destined to rule here." Omari laughed. "Rule? My dear brother, they must be mistaken. It is I who am fit to be king." "Oh," Naya said smoothly, turning to him. "But you, Prince Omari, are meant for something greater. You are a man of refinement, intellect, and class. You should not bother yourself with thrones. Stay here, where you will be worshipped and adored as the greatest man to ever live." Omari's grin widened. "Finally, someone who understands me." Zuba, standing behind them, shifted uneasily. "My princes," he said cautiously, "something is not right here." But his warning fell on deaf ears. Tau placed a hand on the warrior's shoulder. "Tell me more about this kingdom." Omari turned to Queen Naya. "You may begin my coronation feast immediately." And so, the City of Illusions welcomed the foolish princes with open arms, knowing full well they had walked into a trap. Omari's delusion. Omari was taken to a lavish palace where silk cushions and golden goblets surrounded him. Dancers twirled, musicians played, and servants brought him every delicacy imaginable. "Ah," he sighed, stretching on a velvet couch. At last, the place worthy of my greatness. But something was strange. No matter how much he ate or drank, his hunger and thirst never faded. His belly felt full, yet he remained unsatisfied. He turned to a nearby servant. "More food." The servant bowed. "Of course, my king." Omari blinked. "King?" The servant smiled. "Yes, my lord. You are the ruler of all. There is no need to leave. Ever." Omari's grin faltered. No need to leave. He glanced at the grand windows of the palace, only to find they were gone. The once bright halls were now endless corridors of mirrors, each reflecting him over and over again. Then, the reflections began to move on their own. They grinned, mocked, and sneered at him. "King of fools," one whispered. "A ruler of nothing," another chuckled. The mirrors distorted, and the walls began to close in. Omari, once reveling in his self-importance, now found himself trapped, a prisoner of his own vanity. Tau's false glory. Meanwhile, Tau was taken to a colossal arena where thousands cheered his name. "The greatest warrior," they roared. "King Tau! King Tau!" He was handed a sword, and a massive beast, twice the size of a lion, with glowing red eyes and iron claws, was released onto the sand. Tau grinned, raising his blade. "Is this my test? Laughable." He charged. The beast swiped too fast. Tau barely dodged. He lunged, striking with his sword, only to see the blade pass through the creature as if it were made of mist. The crowd roared with laughter. Confused, Tau struck again. Nothing. The beast, however, was very real. It clawed his arm, sending him sprawling into the sand. A booming voice echoed. "You are nothing but a fool playing king." The arena vanished, the cheers turning into harsh mocking whispers. The sand beneath him became black tar, pulling him down. Tau, once confident in his strength, was now drowning in the weight of his own arrogance. Zuba's cleverness. While the princes suffered in their illusions, Zuba wandered the city, untouched by its magic. He watched as shimmering figures danced in the streets, their laughter hollow, their faces vacant. "This city is a prison," he realized. Then, he heard something, a low hissing sound. In a dark alley, an old man in tattered robes leaned against a wall, eyes full of sorrow. "You seek the truth?" the old man asked. Zuba hesitated, then nodded. The man pointed toward a fountain in the city's center. "The city's illusion is tied to the water. Break the fountain, and the spell will shatter." Without wasting time, Zuba rushed to the fountain. He picked up a discarded torch and hurled it into the pool of shimmering water. A violent wind howled through the streets. The water darkened, then exploded. At once, the illusions crumbled. The golden city flickered, revealing crumbling ruins. The grand palace, the arena, the feasts, all vanished. And in the midst of the rubble were Omari and Tau, lying on the ground, weak, confused, and terrified. Zuba ran to them. "Wake up, my princes." Their eyes snapped open. What happened?" Omari gasped. "You were trapped in an illusion," Zuba said, helping them up. "It was all a lie." Tau clenched his fists, shaking. "I was a fool." Omari lowered his head. "As was I." For the first time, the brothers had no argument. They turned toward the mountains, where the Valley of Echoes awaited. They had one final test before they could claim the Crystal of Clarity. And this time, they knew the truth: wisdom is not about believing in one's greatness, but in knowing one's flaws. The city of illusions had crumbled behind them, leaving behind only ruins and the bitter taste of shame. Prince Omari, Prince Tau, and their loyal servant Zuba trudged forward in silence. For the first time in their lives, the foolish princes were not boasting, not arguing, and not laughing at each other's failures. The weight of their mistakes in the city lingered. Ahead of them lay the Valley of Echoes, the place known for testing not just a traveler's strength, but the depth of their soul. Legend spoke of voices whispering secrets, truths buried deep within one's heart. Many who entered never returned, driven mad by the voices. Zuba tightened his grip on his walking staff. "My princes, we must be careful." Omari scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual arrogance. "Careful? I am always careful." Tau sighed. "That's why you were eating invisible food for 2 days." Omari grumbled but did not argue. Instead, they stepped into the valley. The voices of the past. The moment their feet touched the dry, cracked ground, a cold wind howled, carrying whispers in the air. The valley stretched endlessly, flanked by towering cliffs that seemed to breathe. Then came the first voice. "Omari, your people mock you behind your back. They whisper that you are nothing but a fool who wears a crown he does not deserve." Omari stiffened. His hands clenched. "That's a lie. Is it?" The voice hissed. A second voice rose, this one for Tau. "Tau, you pretend to be strong, but you have never won a true battle. Every fight you have won was because of others. Without your father's name, you are nothing." Tau growled. "That's not true." The voices laughed. And then came Zuba's voice. "Zuba, you are a servant. No matter how clever you are, no matter how many times you save them, you will always be beneath them. You will die as a shadow in their story." Zuba flinched. His grip on his staff tightened, but he said nothing. The wind howled louder, and shadows formed, tall, warped versions of themselves, their reflections twisted with mocking expressions. "We do not have time for this," Zuba said firmly. "Ignore them." But Omari had already stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You think I am a fool? Then let me show you the mind of a king." He swung his sword, straight through the air. The shadow simply reformed. Tau gritted his teeth. "Fine. You say I have never won a battle. Then I'll win this one." He charged, punching his shadow, only for his fist to pass through nothing. The echoes laughed. Louder. Harsher. Zuba clenched his jaw. He had watched these brothers make mistake after mistake, and he was tired. This was a battle that could not be won with force. Taking a deep breath, he called out, "My princes. You cannot fight the truth." Omari and Tau froze. "The valley speaks only what you fear to be true," Zuba continued. "You can fight it all you want, but unless you accept it, it will never stop." Omari's eyes darted to the laughing shadows. "But I am not a fool." "Then prove it by learning from your mistakes," Zuba said. "A fool is not someone who makes mistakes, but someone who refuses to change." Tau's fists were trembling. "I have won battles. But not alone," Zuba replied. "Strength is not just in fighting. It is in knowing when to rely on others." The voices hissed. The shadows twisted violently. The laughter turned into screams, and then silence. The valley stilled. The cold wind ceased. And before them, standing atop a small stone pedestal, lay a shimmering blue crystal, the crystal of clarity. A prize for wisdom. Omari reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the smooth, cool surface, a deep voice rumbled through the valley. "To claim wisdom, one must pay the price. What will you offer?" The princes exchanged nervous glances. Zuba, without hesitation, stepped forward. "Take my title as a servant. Let me walk as an equal." Omari and Tau whirled to him in shock. "Zuba, you." But before they could protest, the valley shifted. Zuba's simple servant clothes transformed into a robe of deep blue and silver. The dust and grime of his long journey vanished. The deep voice spoke again. Sacrifice accepted. The crystal of clarity glowed, then vanished into Omari's hands, its energy seeping into their bones. And in the silence that followed, the princes looked at their companion, not as a servant, but as an equal. For the first time in their lives, the foolish princes had learned true wisdom. But their journey was not yet over. Ahead of them, in the distance, lay their kingdom, and the foolish brothers had one final test awaiting them. The long journey home was quieter than it had ever been. Prince Omari, Prince Tau, and their newly honored companion, Zuba, moved across the vast plains toward their kingdom, the great kingdom of Zundora. The golden towers of their homeland shimmered in the distance, the place they had left behind as foolish brothers, but now they were determined to return as something more. The crystal of clarity, now held in Omari's hands, pulsed with a faint blue glow, filling the air with a quiet hum. It was more than a treasure, it was a reminder of their trials, their mistakes, and their hard-earned wisdom. But before they could cross into the gates of their kingdom, they found the army waiting for them. A kingdom in chaos. At the kingdom's grand gates, hundreds of warriors stood armed with spears and shields. The banners of Zundora fluttered violently in the wind, and at the front of the soldiers stood their father, King Jabari. His once proud face was worn with anger, and his piercing dark eyes glowed with disappointment. "You return at last," the king said, his deep voice rumbling like a distant storm. "But I do not see two princes before me. I see two fools who abandoned their people." Omari and Tau bowed their heads. For the first time in their lives, they had no excuses. The king raised his hand, and a man stepped forward, their younger cousin, Prince Jahi, clad in ceremonial robes. "While you were off chasing dreams, Jahi has ruled in your absence," King Jabari said. "He has shown wisdom and restraint while you have embarrassed our family." Jahi smirked, folding his arms. "The kingdom no longer needs you." The words cut deep, but this time, the brothers did not react with anger or arrogance. Instead, Tau lifted his chin. "We understand your disappointment, father." Omari took a deep breath. "But we have returned with wisdom, not excuses." The king's eyes narrowed. "Prove it." The final test. A great crowd gathered to witness the trial. The people of Zundora had once laughed at their foolish princes, but now they watched with curiosity. Jahi stepped forward, smug. "Let us test your wisdom, cousins." He held out a small wooden box, sealed tight with a silver lock. "Inside this box is the symbol of a true ruler. If you have truly gained wisdom, you will know what it holds." Omari and Tau exchanged glances. The old them would have guessed gold, jewels, or a crown, but they were no longer the same men who had left the kingdom. Omari turned to Zuba. "Brother, what do you think?" The crowd gasped at the word brother. A prince asking a former servant for counsel. Zuba smiled. "Wisdom is not found in riches or power, but in understanding oneself." He turned to Jahi. "If we are correct, then the box is empty." Jahi froze. Tau stepped forward. "Because a wise ruler does not seek a throne to fill a void, they must be whole before they rule." King Jabari's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Jahi, however, growled and threw open the box. Inside, there was nothing. The crowd erupted in shock, and murmurs spread like wildfire. They were right. The fools have grown wise. They truly have changed. For the first time, King Jabari smiled. The foolish brothers no more. The king stepped forward and placed a hand on each of his sons' shoulders. "You left my court as arrogant fools," he said. "You return not as perfect men, but as men willing to learn. That is true wisdom." The people cheered. Omari turned to Zuba and placed a golden necklace around his neck. "You have guided us through our ignorance, Zuba. From this day forward, you are Zuba, the king's advisor." Tears welled in Zuba's eyes, but he held his head high. Tau and Omari then turned to Jahi. Our cousin is strong, Tau said. He should serve as general of the kingdom's armies. Jahi, though bitter, bowed his head. It would be an honor. At last, King Jabari raised his arms and declared, "Let there be a feast. Tonight, we celebrate the return of the wise princes." And so, the kingdom of Zundora rejoiced. The two foolish brothers had returned, not as warriors or kings, but as men who had finally learned the greatest lesson of all. True wisdom is not about knowing everything, but about knowing when to listen, when to learn, and when to grow.